The peak performance presence for me goes right back. I was a theatre director in my first career for actually 20 years, and I taught acting. And what I was always interested in was what happened when an actor really opened, when their whole system, mind and body and imagination really opened, and they would become like a kind of vessel or channel. Whether it was for a text or a character or a situation, it would literally start to flow through their entire being. And this was extraordinary. I mean, I was an actor for 3 years. I always knew I wanted to be a director, but I experienced this as an actor. And it was, I guess in psychology, it would be called an altered state, because it really was something remarkable. And then when I was a director and teacher, I became totally obsessed actually with not only what this was, but how would we practice it? You know, because I think these states come to varying degrees to all of us. And if you talk to sports people or artists, it's like their holy grail. You know, how do we practice this?
Yes.
How do we make this more consistent rather than this occasional amazing thing that happens? So over many, many years, I studied that. Physical discipline, emotional discipline, mental discipline, and spiritual discipline. And we really found out a lot about how that could become more consistent. And then, of course, I transferred that when I made the transition into working with executives. I brought a lot of that with me. So that's the kind of the origin, in a way, of that title, Peak Performance Presence.
Yes.
The word presence is very important, and it's used a lot in the corporate world because everyone recognizes how critical it is for a leader to what is their presence. In many ways, I think you could argue it's one of the most important factors in whether we want to follow someone, whether we trust someone, whether we feel they're enabling our potential, and so on and so forth. And presence is not something that's defined by how clever you are. How clever you are is obviously very important, but presence has a much deeper essence to it. And that's always been a core of my work. It's something very deeply authentic. It's very deeply connected, because when someone has presence, you feel they're really there. And you feel they're there physically, you feel they're emotionally available, you feel they're really listening, you feel they're connected to some kind of deeper sense of purpose in themselves. And
wonderful.
So that's a core topic. Then the higher consciousness, which is equally important. Sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, spiritual teacher Richard Moss, he says the measure of our distance from between us and other people is a measure of our distance away from ourselves.
No, I think that's a beautiful quote. Yes, absolutely. And you know, in the corporate world, things become easily very transactional because there's so much pressure, there is so much stress, and people relate to each other often in a very horizontal kind of way. And you know, once we get into the work and people start connecting more deeply, first of all, as you say, to themselves, but then they start really listening to each other more deeply. It's a revelation.